Johnny Bones Jones was one of the greatest MMA fighters to ever step foot in the octagon. But was he the greatest? Nate Diaz doesn't think so. He thinks that his legacy is finished and that Jones shouldn't even be in the GOAT conversation anymore. So why doesn't Diaz respect Jones's legacy? Plus, who's the only man Nate Diaz will return to the octagon for? Stay tuned for the latest MMA news coming right up. First up, the complicated history of Jon Jones. Love him or hate him, it's hard to deny that Jon Jones has done so many great things in the UFC. He hasn't lost a fight since a controversial disqualification back in 2009. Apart from that, his record is perfect. Well, that is except for his no contest ruling over his win over Daniel Cormier. And that testing was just the tip of the iceberg for Jones's misbehavior. His hotly anticipated fight against DC had already been pushed back twice. The first time it was because of Jones's involvement as a driver in a hit-and-run accident, which stripped him of his championship belt. And the second time Jones tested positive for banned substances. When all was said and done, Johnny Bones Jones proved himself as one of the best fighters on the planet by again beating DC before the decision was overturned for his post-match positive sample. If that sounds like a lot of misdeeds, that's because it is. Jones is one of the most controversial fighters in MMA history. While many hold him up as a world-class natural fighter, his history with drugs and police have tarnished his legacy. Despite that, UFC President Dana White has no doubt that Jones is the greatest of all time. Now, after a 2-year break from MMA, Jones wants to return to the ring and finish off at the top. To do that, he is moving up from the light heavyweight division, where he has dominated for more than a decade, and up into heavyweight. Jones versus Miocic. Jones doesn't get a shot at the heavyweight title immediately. Even for him, there are some rules, and it looks like the man he'll have to get through first is Stipe Miocic. Stipe is coming off a loss to heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou, a man who he beat before in 2018. He first earned the title over Fabricio Werdum in a brutal KO at UFC 198, and went on to steamroll Alistair Overeem, Junior Dos Santos, and Francis Ngannou to defend it. So if Jones is hoping for an easy fight, he's got another thing coming. Stipe has beaten Jones's rival Daniel Cormier twice before and is still in his prime. Add to that the fact that Jon Jones has never fought at heavyweight, and Chael Sonnen thinks Johnny Bones Jones might not be prepared. Sonnen said that the biggest adjustment for Jones will be fighting against someone bigger than him that has the power to knock him out. When Daniel Cormier fought Stipe, he struggled to take him down, which means it's pretty likely the fight will be on their feet. Jones is a deadly and dynamic striker, but Chael isn't sure that he's really ready for the power difference between light heavyweight and heavyweight. On the other hand, former 2-division UFC champion Henry Cejudo is backing Jones for the win. Cejudo said that Jones's approach to MMA and incorporating new skills into his fighting is what makes him the greatest of all time. Cejudo thinks Jones can beat anyone. Okay, let's say that Henry Cejudo is right, and Jon Jones beats Stipe Miocic. What next? At the age of 35, he doesn't have too much time to waste, and his former teammate has revealed exactly how many more fights Jones is willing to commit to. Everyone in the UFC wants to be a multi-division champion these days. It's not enough to dominate just one division. Conor McGregor was one of the first to do it when he dismantled Eddie Alvarez. Henry Cejudo held both the flyweight and championship belts at the same time, and up-and-coming stars are coming into the UFC promising to win 2 or even 3 belts. Over 14 years, Jon Jones has done more than enough to earn himself the top spot in the division. Now it's time to cement his legacy by going after the heavyweight belt. But time is not on his side. Jones's teammate Yorgan De Castro says that Bones will only fight 3 more times before hanging up his gloves. If he makes it through Miocic, he will be looking to challenge the champion Francis Ngannou. But the hard part is organizing the timing. Ngannou has been out with a serious knee injury that, according to De Castro, could take more than a year to fully recover from. In a heavyweight title match, De Castro's money is on his teammate. His first-hand experience gives him an insight into just how dangerous the former light heavyweight champion is. Then again, training and performing are two very different things, but Jones has always excelled more in performing. Up next, did Diaz trash Jon Jones' achievements? And which superstar did Nate call out for his next fight? So don't go anywhere. What did Nate Diaz say about Jones's legacy? In Nate Diaz's words, you earn respect. Nate and his brother Nick have been fan favorites of the UFC for decades. Much of that is for his no BS attitude and tough mentality. When he was asked about his opinion on if Jon Jones is the GOAT, he didn't hold back. Nate's contract with the UFC officially ended after UFC 279, where he submitted Tony Ferguson in the 4th round. The road ahead is still unclear, but he has said that he is looking at options outside the octagon. It ends a long contract feud between the UFC and President Dana White, and it's hard to blame him. Nate followed in his brother Nick's footsteps to join the promotion in 2008, after competing in the Ultimate Fighter TV series. Almost 15 years in the game have seen him up against names like Rory McDonald, Rafael dos Anjos, and Conor McGregor. He is one of the most respected veterans in the sport, and his opinion carries some weight. So when he said that Jon Jones is out of the question for the GOAT debate, it means something. When asked about it, Nate lumped fighters like Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre, and Fedor Emelianenko together as the OGs of MMA and took a swipe at Jones. He said, while those names are all great fighters, they were all shooting steroids. I mean, with all due respect to them because they are great, but if you do steroids, that's just completely, if you're caught, you're a F. Nate has been openly critical about how prevalent performance-enhancing drugs are in this sport and said that even with advantages, he would never back down from a fight. Next up, Diaz releases footage from his UFC 279 brawl. Emotions run high at UFC events. Fighters put in thousands of hours of work to perform on one night to an audience of millions. That's why fights don't only happen in the octagon, and Nate Diaz seems to be a magnet for conflict. In a YouTube video he released documenting the build-up to UFC 279, Diaz's team took to throwing water bottles at his opponent Khamzat Chimaev's team. Water bottles? Press conference? Is anyone else hearing Conor McGregor flashbacks? Granted, this one didn't descend into chaos like McGregor's did, but it was a characteristic Nate Diaz moment. The short documentary also showed Nate's reaction to the news that Chimaev failed to make weight. Nate doesn't seem to be fazed in the slightest, but he says that it's a little inconvenient that he has to learn how to fight Tony Ferguson at the last minute. You wouldn't know it from his performance though. He barely put a foot wrong to finish his UFC career with a beautiful submission, just like he did in his first big UFC fight back in 2007. Now he's ready for a change. Nate Diaz might be done with the UFC, but he is still keen to keep fighting. But is he heading to the boxing ring, or will he continue in MMA? The Stockton Gangster tweeted that the only person he would come back to fight would be Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The Rock was the man to present the symbolic BNF belt to Jorge Masvidal after his win over Diaz in 2019. Diaz seems to be joking about fighting Johnson, who is now a Hollywood superstar, but the wrestler-turned-actor has an impressive resume. He was an NFL hopeful during his time at the University of Miami and went on to become one of the WWE's most successful wrestlers. What's more likely is a return to the cage, but it won't be with the UFC. Bellator's president, Scott Coker, has revealed that he has already held talks with Diaz and is currently exploring their options. Coker said that he knows Diaz is focused on a potential fight with Jake Paul, but that he would love to have Nate on board in the future. Bellator MMA is one of the main competitors of the UFC and has lured fighters like Matt Mitrione, Tito Ortiz, Quentin "Rampage" Jackson, and Stephen Bonner. Nate's brother Nick is officially retired from MMA, but returned to take on Robbie Lawler last year. There are now rumors of Nick signing a new 3-fight deal with the UFC in what some see as a last little money grab. So if Nick isn't done just yet, it's hard to imagine that his younger brother Nate is. What would you like to see Nate do next? Should he accept a fight against Jake Paul? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.